Open session back to order. I will report on the closed session. We discussed personnel actions to be voted on in open session. We also consulted with our legal counsel on a legal matter. I'm going to ask everyone to stand for the pledge of allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. The first order of business is our Golden Anchor Award.
Sure. As you know, the Golden Anchor Award we started last spring as a monthly award aimed to recognize an employee or group of employees that exemplify the core values and mission of Kent County Public Schools. The award is based on our mission statement that states, anchored in excellence, Kent County Public Schools will provide personal learning experiences within a collaborative community of learners that inspire our students to reach their highest potential and become engaged global citizens. This month, we are recognizing the Kent County Public School maintenance staff and the elementary custodians. The consolidation of two elementary schools brought a number of challenges to our school system this summer. Facing a number of projects with little time to accomplish them, the maintenance and custodial staff worked with a moving company to move over 2,000 boxes. They carted away an extraordinary amount of trash and other items. The maintenance staff built walls, hung cabinets, moved equipment, reinstated bathrooms, just a number of Promethean boards that were moved and things that were shuffled around was pretty amazing. These individuals worked late, came in early, but more importantly, got the work accomplished. When the doors opened on September 5th, the buildings were clean, the floors gleamed, and the consolidated schools were ready for instruction. These men and women exemplify the Kent County Public Schools core values of collaboration, commitment, and fiscal responsibility. By doing this, they put children first and made sure our schools were great environments for learning. Therefore, it's with great pleasure that we recognize the following: Hannah Kelly, John Nicholson, Bradley Moore, Gary Grimes, Jim Bish, Keith Dreisbach, Marvin Starks, Connie Pennick, Jamie Cornelius, Celestine Cruz, Allie Whitfield, Sam Hicks, Steve Smith, Tammy Griffin, and Jerry Wright. We'd like them to come forward. There's a few of them here with us tonight. The others, they're representing the others who may not be here. So we'd like them to come forward. Congratulations to everyone. Would you like to do it?
Yeah, one of the things that I want to say is many of these custodians worked 15 to 18-hour days. There were times when we were moving all of the furniture and boxes, and not once did anyone complain. And it was a huge, huge task, and I was just incredibly impressed by their dedication. So we have some excellent staff.
Thank you.
We'd love to shake your hand.
Okay, you stay up here so we can. We'd like the five of you to come in here. Would you like to join them for a picture?
I'll stand by.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure what report. Oh, Dr. Couch's reports.
Right. I have about 6 things I need to quickly report about. The first one is the Facilities Long-Term Strategic Planning Committee that has begun. You know, our buildings are dated. Some are in need of urgent attention, such as Galena, who that particular building needs a roof replacement and HVAC replacement. I think it was really evident when we had a lot of rain this summer, and the roof is still leaking. So that project has been delayed, and it was delayed until we made decisions about consolidation. Therefore, Kent County Public Schools is developing a facility strategic plan for future facility renovation, usage, and configuration. The committee is inviting the community to attend one of the community input meetings. Notices will be sent home with students tomorrow. We're going to get them out to the schools tomorrow, and hopefully some will go home tomorrow for sure by Wednesday. There will be opportunities for the community to weigh in. Our first meeting will be September the 25th at the high school at 6:30. September the 26th at Galena Elementary same at 6:30, and then September the 28th at Rock Hall Elementary. We'll also be including a building tour at the end of the community input meetings, because we really want the community to have an opportunity to see our facilities and see the needs that we have for the future. We've been in school almost 2 weeks. Our staff did an incredible job welcoming the students into their schools. We had our first early release day, and our teachers were really hard at work analyzing their data and trying to meet the needs of our students. So I think we definitely need to recognize our teachers for all of the work that they've done with regard to the first few weeks of school. Open house, we already completed open house with our high school, but we have elementary schools that will have open house this week on the 21st. So we hope that the community will attend as well. This is the first meeting for our a new addition to our administrative staff, Dr. Laura Jacob. If you would please, where is she? Oh, there she is. She is the staff member that we hired to replace Mr. McLeod, who departed to take a position in another county. And I wanted to introduce Laura. She comes to us from a rural school district in Pennsylvania. She has a doctorate in instructional technology, and she brings many strengths to the county, particularly in the areas of curriculum and instruction. And she's very much into putting in coding as one of our directives, or at least one of our requirements for our kids. And so she's very committed to that, and I welcome to our county. She had to hit the ground running for sure. Another recognition that I would like to put out there is Tracy Williams. She also has been selected as a member of the Economic Development Commission. She is taking Mr. McLeod's place on that commission, and would like to acknowledge Tracy Williams for serving as our representative on economic development. Challenge Day. Those of you that may have been involved in Challenge Day, that's coming up on the 26th of September. It will be at Kent County High School, and then September 27th at Kent County Middle School. It is an anti-bullying program. For many young people, bullying and any form of oppression are a part of a typical school day. So some students are afraid sometimes to walk down the halls because they're afraid of being teased and humiliated. Challenge Day is an opportunity for students to understand what they bring to the table, the kinds of challenges that they have to deal with at their homes. And it's a day-long interactive workshop where teens, teachers, and community members experience for themselves compassion and connection are indeed possible in our schools. It is a wonderful program. If any of you are interested in volunteering, we are still looking for volunteers, parents who are willing to participate. If you would like to do so, Mrs. Williams is in the back saying, come see her. We're still looking for some more volunteers. It's an excellent program, and we're glad that we're offering that for our students. And that concludes my report.
Mr. Silver, personnel action?
Strategic Planning Committee?
I gave the report on strategic planning, but we do have preliminary FY18 enrollment report.
Okay, gotcha.
So I'd like to invite Mrs. Williams to come up and talk to us a little bit about enrollment. As you know, September 30th is the day that our official enrollment is registered, and that's what dictates what our funding will be for the next year. And so we thought it was important for you all to have some information about that, just as a preliminary overview of our enrollment.
Okay, so President McGee, Dr. Couch, board members, what I did tonight was I basically gave you a front and a back. Didn't print it out or put it on a PowerPoint for tonight because the numbers are still fluctuating so much that really the official report comes after September 30, and those are the numbers that will really, what we'll be basing our funding on. So we've been taking enrollment reports on the first 4 days, last Monday and last Friday. So again, one of the reasons I didn't put it up here is because every single day it's been different, and that's pretty typical. So in a nutshell, I'll kind of give the highlights so the audience gets a picture and you guys have the details up here. So what you can see, you have a front and a back. On the front, you're going to see in terms of, and this is district-wide, not by school at this point, but what you're going to see based on the dates from July 1 to September 15, we saw 99 students transfer out of Kent County Public Schools, and you can see under that the coding of where they went, whether it would be another Maryland public, a private, a homeschooling. You can see the different codes of how many went and where they went. Under that, you'll see 117 new students have enrolled, and again, you'll see those same numbers in terms of where they came to us from, whether it be another public, whether it be a private, whether it be homeschooling. You can see that. Now, the one thing, and again, that really makes your numbers fluctuate this time of year are what we in the school system call W50s. And so when you're looking at codes of where you transfer kids, they all have different codings. And so W50 at this point means they're still in our Power School records, but they haven't shown up to school yet. We haven't received a records request. In other words, we haven't received another school saying we have this student, we need the records. So they're still sitting in our system, but we haven't seen them yet. So that number is what throws the whole thing off just a little bit. So that's a number that after September 30 we have to clean up. The other thing that I noticed just in listening over the years from the board is, because we are a universal pre-K, we like to know, how many of those pre-Kers are we retaining? How many of them are coming back to kindergarten? So from last school year to this school year, we see a 95% return rate. So last school year, at the end of the year, we had 107 pre-Kers. Returning to kindergarten this school year, we have 102. So where did those 5 go? 1 was retained in pre-K, 1 went to Kent School, and 3 moved out of county to other public schools within the state of Maryland. So that's where your 5 students went. Just another interesting number, and I put a definition here for the board members. We have 27 families that to date have filled out paperwork for homeless affidavits, which covers 44 of our students. So in terms of, what does it mean for a student to be considered homeless? It's actually, for educational purposes, it's pretty broad. So in order to be considered what educationally is homeless, you have to have no regular place to live, living in a shelter or other temporary housing, and again, living in places that are not generally appropriate for housing. So you can see how very broad this is. And also have received an eviction notice and have had to move from current housing. So it's fairly broad, but we have 27 families and 44 students to date this school year. On the flip side, this is, you can see, as of September 15, which was last Friday, you can see for the elementary how many students we have in each school, pre-K, K, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's a little difficult to compare it from last year because you had Millington Elementary and Wharton in those numbers. So it's easier probably to compare it by looking at the total elementary, which you'll see in red. Okay, and you'll see the total elementary numbers are down right now by 41. In terms of middle school, you can see the numbers of grade level 6, 7, and 8. Total middle school enrollment is up by 15. Kent County High School, you see the numbers 9, 10, 11, and 12. And by the way, we have a little bump in that 9th grade. It's the biggest class in the building right now at 165. But the high school numbers are up 14. Which when you do all of the math, that's showing us down by about 12 right now. So, but if, like I said, if you do the math in terms of how many went out, how many came in, and then this number, it doesn't quite match, and it's because of those W50s that we have to clean up in the next 2 weeks.
Right. And I think it's important to note that, because we've been talking about this for the last 3 years, is we have high mobility. We have a lot of families moving in and families moving out, but if you look at the information that was noted by Mrs. Williams, we had 99 students transfer out. The majority of them, 54 of them, transferred out of county to another Maryland public school, and 21 transferred out to another U.S. public school. So it,
Out of state.
Yeah, out of state. So the majority of our students are moving out of county, but yet we did have quite a few moving into county. So you'll see 43 moved here from other Maryland public schools, and 31 came in from other out-of-state public schools. So there is a high rate of mobility in our district that, and that has been ongoing for at least, we've highlighted that for the last 4 years. That hasn't changed, really.
Has the homeless population gone up?
Dr. Costa, I'd have to go back to last year's numbers, which I can do, but I would need to get my computer real quick to do it.
Oh, no.
But I do have it. I can give it to you at the end of the meeting.
Do we do anything special for these kids to
Yeah.
help them?
Yeah. So the counselors know who these students are. So just for example, these are the students that no doubt would, at least at the high school level, they would have their AP tests paid for, or their SATs paid for, or the PSATs, all of that type of stuff. Or their college application fees would be waived. At the younger levels too, you see that we have several organizations across the county that do gather supplies for kids, whether it be notebooks, pens, pencils, or hygiene products that we have collected that the counselors get and can hand out to those families. We also know who those students are. Every year our Kent County Food Pantry does food for families, and those students are a part of that list. So there are, it's obviously a confidential list, but there are things that we do to try to make life easier the best that we can. There is also some grant monies that are afforded to homeless students that should, let's say for instance, graduation, maybe can't get the cap and gown. Those monies could be used to purchase that. So those are just some examples, and forgive me for talking high school, it's what I've been doing for the last 18 years. So,
What do you do with a student who starts the school year at one school and for any one of these circumstances finds themselves in a different part of the county? Do they re-enroll in a different county? Do they continue to go? I mean, I would think that the stability of their school would be important.
you mean a student that would, for example, maybe move across county lines?
Well, I'm not only talking about that, but say a kid starts the year in Chestertown.
We've already had it.
Okay.
It's already happened.
So what happens to that student?
We have paperwork that's filled out, so we know who they are.
Okay.
And then the counselor is also aware, and then they're simply just transferred in Power School from one school to the other.
Okay,
It's almost, if you can relate it to anything, it might be sort of kind of like an out of zone.
Okay. That's what I wondered. Okay.
I just want to know, that's really, for small as we are, that number is disturbing. One is too many.
Yeah.
I see 27. That's really disturbing for us to be in a small county and have, wow.
Numbers make a big difference for us.
Thank you. Anybody have any other questions?
Thank you, Ms. Williams.
Mr. Silver, personnel.
Certainly. During closed session, we reviewed the personnel actions for this meeting, and we bring those for your consideration this evening.
I'm looking for a motion to approve the personnel action.
I move that we approve the personnel action, hiring new teachers.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. Ms. Yanakis. Dr. Couch.
Okay. Next item is cancellation agreement. I'm requesting approval from the Board of Ed to move forward with the cancellation agreement with Reliable Professional Services, LLC, DBA Reliable Transportation. What I would say is, despite the best efforts, Reliable has encountered difficulties in fulfilling the terms of the contract due to unforeseeable circumstances, making the current bus contract no longer feasible. The Kent County Public Schools and Reliable are working to create a smooth transition to facilitate timely, safe, and efficient transportation of the students. This transition will eventually result in the use of a combined fleet with a combination of private bus contractors and bus routes operated by drivers who will be employed directly by the Kent County Public Schools. The Kent County Public Schools and Reliable met with drivers who are currently employed by Reliable. Drivers were informed that they have the option of being hired by contractors or by the school system. The transition will be completed and gradually beginning today. We had 3 of our private contractors that were already operating their buses in the school system. The transition will begin by putting in those contractors who have hired their employees and will be driving, but we will also be hiring drivers as soon as we have our own buses and our confirmed routes. In the meantime, Reliable is committed to paying all drivers for the time they are employed by Reliable. It is important to note that even with the scheduled transition of routes to private contractors and the Kent County Public Schools, we still anticipate that we will have a driver shortage. So anyone who has a CDL and is willing to obtain a PNS endorsement to drive a school bus, we will be considered for employment. We've got some leads on a couple of bus drivers, so we're following up on that. But if the private contractor or the school system is unable to fill all the driving positions, we will most certainly have the same challenges that has been occurring this year. The final terms of the agreement are currently under negotiation. Those were reviewed in closed session and are being negotiated through third-party legal representatives. Although both sides have agreed to basic terms, there are still some final details that we're working on. So we are going to move forward with negotiation. However, the final agreement will have to be agreed to by the Board of Ed and signed by the Board of Ed. But in order to move the transition forward, I'm requesting approval from the Board of Education for authorization to move forward with the negotiation of this final agreement. And that's what that particular item is in place for.
So you're looking for approval to negotiate the term of the cancellation agreement?
Right. With final approval from the Board of Ed.
Meaning that the board would come back in public session on another date and approve that?
Yes.
So nothing is getting signed tonight, it's just working out the final details?
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Anybody have any questions? I'm looking at a couple of the other agenda items that come right after this. I think those will probably answer the questions that we have. Mr. Reed, do you have a question?
No, I just,
Statement?
my comment is that we do all it's possible to move swiftly on this, but being very careful not to make any further mistakes. So again,
Well, that's why I
swiftly,
was making sure that
but carefully.
we haven't signed anything tonight. We're just continuing to move forward to the cancellation of the contract.
Right.
Mr. Getz, Mr. Williams, Dr. Costa, anything you want to question, add? No. I'm looking for a motion to authorize Dr. Couch to continue negotiating a cancellation agreement.
I make a motion to authorize Dr. Couch on behalf of the Board of Education to negotiate the cancellation agreement on behalf of the Board of Education.
Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any comments or questions? I call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous, Ms. Unikas. All righty, Dr. Couch.
Okay. The next item is an update to our purchasing procedure. You will note that we are bringing forth a policy for emergency procurement. We do not have that provision in place right now in our current policies. And so in order for us to move forward with our transition, we need to have the ability to procure resources and that will help us through the transition. The first motion I would ask the board is you typically have a procedure for approving board policy, which means we introduce it to you in 1 month and then you approve it the next. There have been 2 other instances since I've been superintendent that we've asked the board to waive your procedure and rules for approving policy. So the first motion is to recommend that the board waive their procedure for approving board policy. So I would ask you to do that. And then I would ask, the second motion would be for board approval for this new policy, which then provides us with a provision for emergency procurement.
All right. Other questions? Moving forward? I'm looking for the first motion. The administration recommends that the board waive the procedure for approving board policy.
Make a motion to approve the waiver of approving board policies.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Questions, comments? Call for the vote, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, you're looking for a second motion. The administration recommends board approval for purchasing procedure policy, which includes a provision for emergency procurement.
I would note, just as a follow-up, that I have been in discussion with the AG's office and also the state superintendent. They are well aware of our situation and believe that as we move down the list of things that we're asking board approval for, that this fits well within emergency procurement.
I'm looking for a motion.
I move that we approve this recommendation for board approval for purchasing emergency procurement.
Is there a second?
Second.
I would just say that I think this meets the criteria of an emergency. So I'm calling for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you. Dr. Couch?
The next item is approval to procure negotiation of new school buses. We have signed contracts with private contractors that are, will be or already on the road in terms of transporting our students. We will be transitioning some of those private contractors. Three of them were in place today, and we expect to have 3 more by the end of next week. But that still leaves a void of 14 buses that we need to procure, 12 regular buses, or just normal buses, I guess, and 2 special needs buses. We have been in contact with other districts that have had already put out RFPs, and we're piggybacking on Washington County's procurement for the vast majority of these buses. They are available on the lots. They do meet, and Mr. Wheeler, you may want to note in terms of the specs that he reviewed all of the specs with the vendors. They do meet Maryland standards and county standards. They are available for shipping, and we can start receiving them. Maybe you want to speak to that, Mr. Wheeler.
We can receive them as early as next week.
And so right now, we do have a tentative amount of about $1.3 million for these buses. And I will speak a little bit in terms of how we will purchase them and using the lease purchase financing, which many counties are using at this point, and a very desirable interest rate. But we need approval from the board to move forward with final negotiation. We will have to schedule a special board meeting in the next couple of days so that the board can approve the final numbers. We've gotten, and I can pass out to the board members here. We worked on this till about 4 o'clock this afternoon, and you'll see the amounts of the sales for Thomas buses. All of those are firmed, and they are a part of the piggybacking contract. The amounts in yellow that have been highlighted are the amounts that we're still trying to negotiate through international. So you'll see every bus that was available we're basically purchasing. We were fortunate enough to be able to find all the buses that we need. The special needs buses we'll have to order, and Mr. Wheeler, when did they say that we could have those?
16 weeks.
So we're going to have a little bit of a void, and we're going to look at leasing some of those buses and or seeing if other counties will allow us to borrow some of their buses. So we're still looking at that as well. When we come back to the board and ask you to approve the final purchase, We hope to also bring to you a recommendation to purchase 3 spares. 2 spare buses and then 1 spare special needs bus, so that we are able to maintain our fleet. I will be talking to the county commissioners tomorrow evening about our ability to park our buses at the Board of the Public Works building. They have, I think, at least there's some indication that there would be room for us. It'll be a bit tight, but we would like to move forward with that request. And then I've also visited with Mrs. Heller about requesting as well for the school district to participate in their bulk fuel purchase that they use for their own buses as well, which will keep our costs down in terms of filling up our buses. So we're scheduled to be on the agenda tomorrow to talk about other things, but this certainly will be part of that request. The other thing is that there is a planning and zoning requirement that does not allow more than 5 buses to be parked in any one location. So we are moving forward with requesting a text amendment and getting that changed in terms of allowing us to park our buses. We haven't made the final determination whether we will permanently leave our buses at the Public Works building on Morgneck, or whether we'll divide them up and perhaps move them in different locations. Like maybe some might be logical to leave at the high school in a secure location there to cut down on deadhead miles, or if we plan to move them elsewhere. But I think right now the urgency is that we just need to find a place to park them and secure them until we have that resolved. But we're moving forward as quick as we can with regard to the location of the buses. But what we're asking for is board approval to give us authorization to move forward with purchasing these buses.
I got a couple questions.
Yes.
So how many total buses do we need to cover all our routes between the contractors and what we need to buy?
We have 24 routes. We have 20 routes, some of which have, we need 20 buses to run our first tier runs. And then we have 4 special needs buses, so a total of 24. Second tier, we only need 17 to run the second tier, but we also need the 4 buses, special needs buses to run second tier. We have one contractor that is willing to allow us to use the bus for field trips and athletics. We also have another contractor that is willing to run field trips and athletics, and then one of the new bus purchases would give us the 3rd bus. That would allow us to have 3 buses for field trips and athletics. What we did last year was we tried to, it was really difficult because we only had 2 buses that served our athletics and field trips, and it was very difficult to run on those 2 buses. But because we'll have county resources and we'll have additional private contractors, we believe that, we can, that's where we're coming up with the 12 buses and the 2 special needs.
I just want to confirm on the record that these buses will be equipped with not only what is required by Maryland certification for buses, but for Kent County standards, which are all the safety requirements.
And I'll have Mr. Wheeler
Yes, they
speak to
will
that.
have all the safety requirements that are required by the
Okay.
I sent all of our specs to 3 different vendors, and those buses match our specs.
Okay, thank you. Is there a time frame for when we'll be canceled? Or is that part of what we authorize you to in the negotiation part?
Right, I mean, we're, Reliable knows that we're transitioning in the private contractors, so that, as we start working them into the routes, then we're transitioning out some of their drivers. As we get our own buses, what I would note is that the local drivers that are driving for Reliable would then become county employees. So whenever we have our own buses, then they would be working for Kent County Public Schools.
So I guess the answer to that is, A, we have to get our buses, and B,
Right.
we have to get all our drivers. And when
Right.
that happens,
They were fully transitioned out.
okay. Anybody else, any questions?
Just a question on the model. This model seems to be, from what I've seen throughout the Eastern Shore at least, that the model of having public school buses as well as, just speak to how,
The hybrid.
yeah, the
Yes.
hybrid.
Yeah, it's a hybrid. A lot of counties, there's, I think White Comico owns all of their buses. So, it's a variety of ways. Some do only private contractors. But the surrounding counties, Caroline, Talbot, and Queen Anne's are hybrids, where they have some private contractors and some district-owned buses.
What does Cecil do now?
Maybe you know that.
I'm not sure. I know they have a lot of contracted buses. I think they do have a mixture also.
Okay. Other questions? I'm looking for a motion that we authorize Dr. Couch for the lease purchase, financing. Is that
No,
what-
we're the purchase of 14 buses.
Okay.
Yeah, well, for us to move forward with negotiation of
Oh,
of
okay,
purchasing
okay, gotcha.
14 buses.
Stepping ahead of myself. Is there a motion? The administration requests that the Board of Education approve the negotiation of the purchase of 12 regular buses and 2 special needs buses not to exceed $1.5 million. The lease purchase agreement will be brought forward for final approval at a special board meeting once we know exactly what the cost is.
Right, and we're,
But
because we know,
we've already put a ceiling on it, right?
right, but what I would note is, and we'll do this at the end of the meeting, it's obviously an important purchase for us to move forward. So we're looking at potentially having a special board meeting on Wednesday, if it's possible.
Wednesday of this week?
Yes. Because that's where we're gonna have to,
What time are you thinking?
whatever time we can get a quorum. But,
Okay.
we can't seal the purchase until we,
Okay, well, what I'm asking you is then, if that number is a little nebulous, are we gonna hold ourselves to that 1.5
Yeah,
mil?
we feel certain we'll come in under that.
Okay.
But just giving ourselves a little flexibility.
Okay.
With
It's
regards
part of
to
the,
that.
so that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
I
and not
don't
to
want to
exceed.
handcuff you, say you're not gonna do it. Okay, gotcha. I'm looking for a motion.
I make a motion that we approve the negotiation of the purchase of 12 regular buses and 2 special needs buses not to exceed 1.5 million.
Second motion.
Are there any questions or discussion? I call for the vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous, Ms. Unitas. Alrighty, lease purchase financing.
I'm gonna let Ms. Towers talk about that. She did a fantastic job looking for lease purchase agreements that have been negotiated by other counties, in particular Caroline County. And this will allow us to be able to purchase these buses, so.
All right, good evening. As Dr. Couch was saying, this is a huge purchase with blessing, and talking to the counterparts in other districts, they were just finding out how they can normally do it. And this lease purchasing financing is a really good option because the borrowing money rate is so cheap now. For 10 years, it's at 2.15%. So you can even go out and get a home loan for that amount. So here we're bringing tonight, we're looking to piggyback off. Caroline County just did a lease purchasing agreement with City National Finance, and they actually ordered 3 buses. We're looking at 14 buses at a rate of 2.15 for 10 years with an estimated interest of $183,000.
And we noted that if it were to be $1.5 million, our annual cost for those buses would be about $168,000. So that fits within our budget for transportation. So when we cost out everything from the contractors to the cost for drivers within the county, and also with the payments for the buses. And the other thing is, we were concerned about early
The prepayment.
and they indicated that there would be no penalty for prepayment of that amount. So we would like for you all to, go ahead.
And then also want to mention that this would be for 10 years. After that 10 years, it is ours.
Okay.
So then an average life of a school bus is 15 years. So
We're looking at 5 years of not paying anything.
Or if sooner, if we can pay it off
Okay.
sooner, yeah.
Okay.
And the thing that the reason why we would like for the board to approve the lease purchase financing is that gives us, again, ability to go to the dealers and say, you know, this is what we want to do. They would provide all of the documentation for the lease purchase financing, and then we would bring all of that for your approval at, you know, hopefully a meeting within the next couple of days when we'll have the final cost for the buses and then the actual documentation for the lease purchase. But, you know, one is kind of contingent upon the other, so we need authorization from the board to move forward with that as well.
Dr. Couch, what's the advantage of piggybacking with the other school districts?
I got to know this term very well this year. Piggybacking, it allows you to, there's a huge bid process in order to procure an item. There's different steps. If a county has already done the bid process, you can request to actually piggyback off the contract, where the basic terms of that contract carries over to what you would like, and then also it just helps with the negotiation process, because that's already been done for you. And with a small school system, it seems to work good for us.
And they don't charge us.
No.
Are there any other questions? The administration requests the Board of Education piggyback off of Caroline County's lease purchase financial agreement with City National Capital Finance for an amount not to exceed $1.5 million for the purchase of 14 school buses at a rate of 2.15% for 10 years, with an estimated interest cost of $183,000. There is no penalty for prepayment. You're looking for a motion? Correct. So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any questions, comments? I call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous, Ms. Yanakis. Thank you, Dr. Couch. Thank you, Ms. Towers. Public participation, has anyone signed up?
I'm going to ask a question.
Do you mind just coming to the podium and tell us, identify yourself, please? Just for the record.
Hi, Francoise Sullivan.
Thank you.
Okay. The $1.5 million that you're talking about, is that going to be coming out of the budget over the next 10 years? So is that going to be broken out into the budget? So how much is currently going to be spent from the 2017-2018 budget for the purchase of the buses?
I'll let Ms. Towers explain that.
Right, we'll have to add in, just for the lease purchase for the buses, $168,303.
And is that able to come out of the current fund balance, or is that going to be taken from what was allotted as Reliable's contract payment?
Well, when we cancel their contract, all of that money, we cancel the payments for them for the remainder of the year. All of that remains in the budget. So I guess that pretty much answers some of your question. With regard to what else we are going to do, just to provide ourselves with some leeway, is we will be bringing a budget adjustment request to the, and later on you'll see that we are asking the budget adjustments to be approved by the board, but we'll also be taking it to the Board of Commissioners to ask them to approve bringing in all available fund balance into this year's budget, which is about $175,000 that we will bring into this year.
And the Board of Ed meeting, the special one that you're scheduling for Wednesday, will that be open or will that be a closed session?
All of you open,
Okay.
if they agree
We
to
can get the-
Wednesday.
Ms.
They
Sullivan,
can do it
I was
Wednesday.
wondering if I'm just guessing that maybe the point of your question to Dr. Couch is, which we need to air publicly, is that money for the purchases of the bus is not going to be taken away from some other, I mean, it's some money that was already dedicated for teachers or salaries or classroom. It's not going to be taken away from something else.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Reports, Kent County Teachers Association, Kent County Education Support Personnel Association, Kent County Administrators and Supervisors Association, Kent County Commissioners, board discussion. Dr. Costa, we'll start with you.
Well, I've been to a number of schools, either before they started or just afterwards, and I was so impressed how gleaming they were. I really think the custodians award is really well deserved. I would never have thought of it, but the schools look great. And one of the things I just wanted to say is I've talked to a number of parents who wrote letters of complaint about the buses, and one of the things that made me feel better was when I asked them if other things were going well with their children in school, and everyone said that their children really liked school this year, and we're happy. So some people are doing things right, even if it's not us. Thank you.
Mr. Reed?
Just a question pertaining to buses, and I don't know if Dr. Couch, Mr. Willer, you can answer this, but when we finally get settled in with our drivers, I know some drivers, local drivers who are driving with us right now, they have some routes right now that they're not familiar with, and they haven't had a chance to practice those routes, so they may be a little behind, not a lot like it used to be, but maybe 10, 15 minutes behind. Will they have set routes once we get established?
Yes, they will have set routes and set bus numbers.
Set routes and set bus numbers, because I know that was something that was brought out with my bus is always changing numbers, and I have a different bus driver. So I kind of thought along those lines, but just want to verify that. Thank you, sir.
Set routes and set bus numbers. Unless there's a emergency situation.
Right.
Of course, which there's no rise, I understand that, absolutely.
Plan is to have set routes, set bus numbers, set drivers.
Okay, great. Thank you, sir.
Anu?
So, as we know, Hurricane Harvey has really affected a lot of homes, and one of our teachers, Miss Getz, she put together an event which they gathered over 740 donations in just 1 week. And around the first week of school, students presented gift bags and appreciation notes to first responders to highlight the impact of what they've done, and just to thank them for their sacrifices. Along with that, school's going pretty well. Clubs are starting up, Science Olympiad, and seniors are getting ready for college, preparing their applications.
Thank you. Mr. Getz?
Yeah, just a couple shout outs, if you will. I just wanted to take a moment to thank the teachers and the folks in this building and throughout the county who have kind of been pulled along with this. I've been in schools and just kind of talking to different folks, and the leadership that's in the room today with the various schools. Just please extend our thanks for kind of working through this. That's the first thing. The second thing, this Thursday, I'm going to call Wendy Keene out here if I can. I've been kind of a proponent of this. CCAC is having their first, if I'm not mistaken, meeting this Thursday night at the middle school, September 21st. And I really encourage folks to attend.
Let's see, Kat.
CCAC is the Special Education Citizen Advisors Committee. And if I believe the title is If Mama Ain't Happy, Beating Down the Stress of Being the Parent of a Challenging Child. So there's a special speaker, starts at 5 o'clock. You can actually meet with Wendy Keene, and then the program starts at 5:30. There's pizza, there's things, but it's just a great event. If you're not tied into the special things that happen at that meeting, parents that are looking for resources and looking for ideas, and I just really encourage folks to stop in. They're doing a great job over there.
Thank you. Mr. Williams?
Just want to say, I'd like to thank the administrators, teachers, volunteers, IAs, custodians, kitchen staff, anybody that helped these children get on buses, that numbers were changed, buses were late. Dealing with the parents that getting your kids to school. I'd just like to thank everybody that has stepped up to try to help. And we're trying to work through the situation. And for the bus drivers in the community that have stepped up to help us out, thank you out to you. This is a situation, and the ones that are affected are the kids of this county. So that's the goal, is to get these children to school on time, get them to school safe, and hopefully a good community will pull together, and hopefully we can get this straightened out.
I want to echo that. It's been a tumultuous first 2 weeks of school. I think you can see tonight that we have taken some pretty immediate and drastic steps to resolve a situation that was unacceptable, unpredictable, and no one wanted. I want to thank everybody in the schools that did pull extra duty, teachers who went in early, teachers who stayed late, support staff and parents who rode the buses to ensure that that children got home and got home safely. I'm happy to see familiar faces driving our buses, and I thank those contractors for signing on. I also, this is definitely a different atmosphere in here than it was a week ago, but last week served an important purpose. So I thank those parents who advocated so passionately for their children. It was difficult to hear, but we did listen, and I just want to thank you for making us accountable. That is our job, and you guys did your job. And we're already, I think, putting the train on the right track, so thank you very much for that. Just a minute, Mr. Bramble. Also, in a totally different thing, I know on Thursday is it's the International Day of Peace, I believe. And at the high school, they're doing a thing called Pinwheels for Peace. Right at the entrance, you should see Kids Spots made some of the pinwheels over the weekend, and the National Art Honor Society at the high school has been making them. And so when you happen to drive by the high school on Wednesday, you should see a lot of, as they call, worldwide peace, and what apparently the students, if I'm understanding correctly, have written inspirational messages of what peace means to them. So that should be a pretty cool thing. So moving on for education services, Ms. Jakimowicz. And Mrs. Williams.
Good evening, President McGee, Dr. Couch, members of the board. Tonight we'd like to share with you our results on the PARCC assessment, both in English language arts and mathematics. As a district, we take our responsibility for improving learning very seriously. Teachers, support staff, and administrators set out daily to inspire students to reach their full potential. We use multiple measures to track growth and progress. including the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers, known as PARC. Last year's PARC results indicated less than half the students scored high enough to meet proficiency in math and reading. These results give great urgency to our educational team, but we are all willing to do whatever it takes to help our students show growth and improvement. We hope that you understand that if you walk into any of our schools, we believe it's obvious our students want to learn. We also believe they have the ability to achieve at high levels. As you mentioned earlier, we have the teachers that are dedicated, teachers that are talented, and willing to go the extra mile to help their students succeed. The path toward improved achievement has not been and will not be a straight line. Instead, it will be a winding journey filled with twists and turns, but we can assure you tonight, as we share these results, you have our commitment to move the needle on student achievement. Tonight, you will not hear excuses from us regarding our results. Instead, we will share the PARC data, and we will also share both our long-term and short-term plan for improvement.
So as Gina just mentioned, there are a lot of different tests we do in the school system, PARC, HSA, CTE, there are a lot, but tonight we're specifically going to talk about PARC data, and PARC is largely English and math, grades 3 through 8 at the elementary and middle levels, and at the high school, PARC includes Algebra 1 and English 10 as the graduation requirements. Algebra 2 is actually a career and college readiness test. So at some point, you may hear me reference CCR or college career ready. And again, at some point too, we may want to come back and revisit just that piece because it's a whole nother layer in itself. But these tests are, as you designed to meet and promote college and career readiness. So it's interesting, over the course of the last 3 years, if you've ever paid attention to it, it's been college and career ready. It is now reads college or career ready. So as I mentioned, that might be something that we come back and have a conversation about at a later date. But tonight it's just about English and math, 3 through 8, Algebra 1, Algebra 2, English 10.
Each board member has been provided with a packet. The packet includes a copy of the PowerPoint. If I can ask you to just look at the page, the first is the PowerPoint. The second handout, it's labeled A, shows the results of students performing levels 3, 4, and 5 on PARC. Levels 3, 4, and 5, and handout B, the third handout, is basically showing performance levels 4 and 5. Level 4 meeting standard, level 5 exceeding standard. In the next few slides, we intend to highlight our challenges. Performance levels are defined by a student's overall scale score and report overall performance by describing how well students meet or exceed grade level expectations. This chart shows the percent of 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders that scored at a performance level 3, 4, or 5. There are 5 levels overall. Levels 1 and 2 are students that did not meet or only partially met expectations. The green color in this chart indicates an increase in percentage of students performing at that level this year compared to last year. Red indicates a decrease in performance. Level 3 is labeled as approaching standard, level 4 is met, and level 5 is exceeded. On this slide, you will note that 60% of our schools, 3rd and 4th graders, perform below the state average in mathematics. 80%, 3 out of 5 schools, 3rd and 5th graders, perform below the state average in reading. This is not something we can fix with interventions. When you see this type of information, we believe it is a core problem. Teachers deserve clarity. They deserve time for collaboration on daily reading and math expectations to help them design lessons that align with these rigorous expectations. This next slide shows the percent of students meeting or exceeding the standard. As we analyze the data, we find the 5th grade results to be alarming. 80% of the schools perform below the state average in math. And 100% of the schools scored below the state average in English language arts. We just want to talk about the elephant in the room and just say, as a small district, there are many factors that have an impact on student learning. In the past 2 years, over 1/3 of our teaching staff is new. Just last year, Kent County Middle School, 5 out of 7 middle school reading teachers were non-tenured. That means over 70% of the reading teachers were in their first 3 years of teaching. In our middle school, 5 out of 6 math teachers were non-tenured, over 80%. Almost all of the middle school core academic teachers last year had less than 3 years teaching experience. New teachers bring new talent. New teachers bring new opportunity. They hold a degree, they are highly qualified, but we also want to point out that it takes time and experience to become highly effective and skilled in all the necessary areas to meet with success. Those areas include things such as classroom management, understanding grade level standards, differentiating, engagement of students. And we are not just talking about student engagement, meaning making sure the students love what they're learning, but we're talking about intellectual engagement, questioning strategies, and how to communicate and involve families in the process. With this high amount of turnover, we must recognize and support the necessary ways to help our teachers help their students succeed. Needless to say, we do experience some unique challenges at the middle school level.
So as Gina just mentioned, and I think the scores, you're seeing a 3, 4, 5 here. The next the next slide will be a 4s and 5s. But you know, when you look at this, I think she's absolutely right. You think about the first time that go back to the job you have now, your first couple of years at it. Were you as good as you are today? I know I wasn't. And I think, again, I think that these next 2 slides exactly show that. I think the unfortunate part is it's difficult for students to catch up. You know, that happens too many years in a row. And Gina's exactly right. Sometimes that's the elephant in the room. But when we start talking about our long-term goals, that's something that we are going to talk about in a few minutes. But so what you're seeing here is that in terms of math and English grades 6, 7, and 8, the only place that they were at or above the state level was 7th grade math. And when you look at 4s and 5s, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and also Algebra 1 was the place where they did above the state average.
And I think one of the things that's interesting to note is we started that pilot program last year where we offered, we offered Algebra 1 just for our STEM students. And this particular, these results show where we offered the Algebra 1 and it was a non-STEM Algebra 1. So what this tells us is that was incredibly successful because the kids got the skills, or they mastered a lot of those skills. So I think, for us, it shows that exposure to that high-level curriculum is incredibly important. And so we need to think of more ways in which we can offer that rigor and provide those kids with those opportunities.
Right, so the difference between, and this will be something we revisit at the end too, the biggest difference between this year's Algebra 1 and the last year's middle school scores are, it's not just a group of STEM students, it's a group of Algebra 1 students. So, and I can say, just because I've looked at that data, of those students that took the Algebra 1 at the middle school level, and again, I think I'm stealing our thunder from the end, aren't I? It was only 2 students that didn't pass out of that group. So. Okay, so when we take a look at the high school, I think again, you're going to notice the decrease in the Algebra 1 scores. So we've been giving this test for 3 years, and at the high school level, this is actually, out of the 3 years, this is our lowest performing year on Algebra 1. And again, not to just beat that dead horse, but I will tell you, last year at the high school, I had 6 non-tenured teachers total on my entire staff. 3 of them were math. So that, it makes it very difficult, and I've said this before and I'm going to say it again, it's very difficult to move forward when you're always starting over. And that's something that we have to stop. The other thing that you will notice, and again, I see that there's a lot of red on this slide, but just being so possessive over the high school, sorry Nick, this is just, even though it's red, look at everything on here. Algebra 2, English, ELA, they're all above the state level. They're just not the scores just weren't as good as they were the year before. We're down by about 10 percentage points in both spots. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but it's about 10 percentage points. So I'm going to turn this over to Gina, but what we wanted to talk about, the rest of the PowerPoint, we wanted to talk about in the short term. We've had a couple of weeks to see these scores. So what are we doing immediately? What are we doing right now that we haven't, that we're going to either continue doing that we think works, or that we are going to go above and beyond and do? And then secondly, we're going to talk about some long-term plans.
Although we have only looked at the information for a short amount of time, there are some changes we'd like to share right now that happened actually 2 months ago. So part of the process and part of the response as a district that we've had to really address the urgency, there are new leadership opportunities across the district, both at central office and in several of our schools, including assistant principals, and teachers that are serving as lead teacher coach roles within their schools. Personalized planning occurred for our new teachers. This is something we haven't done before. When we did our teacher orientation, we actually matched every new teacher up with an experienced teacher of that content or that grade level, and provided time to plan in advance so that wasn't weighing on them when they started on the school year. They could start knowing that they had strong plans to begin the year. Our new principals have also really thought about the time when they planned their master schedules. And additional time has been placed in the schedule both for student learning in reading and math, and also time for increased collaboration for our teachers. And we thank you, because I think the collaborative piece only happened because of the consolidation. So now our teachers are able to have someone that they can talk to that's teaching the same content in the same grade level, and that is going to make a big difference. We've also started our MAP assessment, measured assessment of progress, and this is something last year you may remember we shared that there are multiple reports that are available through this universal screener. The MAP assessment is given 3 times a year, beginning, middle, and end, and basically is used both to track student growth and progress. The tool itself provides a variety of reports. We've gone through several of those before, and we love to talk about them. We'd be happy to go into more detail. But tonight, we'd like to share specific information about something called the Projected Proficiency Summary Report. This comparison data was available to us for the first time. And I just want to tell you a little bit about this. In English Language Arts, 55% of our 3rd through 5th graders scored at levels 3, 4, and 5 on PARC, when you combine grades 3, 4, and 5. When we went back and we examined our end of the year math data, it showed us on this projected proficiency report that we could project that based on that, 48% would score at levels 3, 4, and 5. In the area of ELA, 6 through 8, on PARC, 54% were proficient, and on the MAP projected proficiency, they projected again, 48%. Very close, very much in line, and very, very helpful in terms of helping us plan for student improvement. What this is telling us is that MAP is an effective predictor of student performance, and throughout the year, we as a district have to do a better job in terms of maximizing the use of this information. So knowing this, again, we are not being reactive. We've actually had our first early release day, and our school teams are making plans for that first administration of PARC. When we get that information, we will analyze the data and use that both to help us impact what's happening in the classrooms for core instruction and intervention, but just as important, the principals are also sharing with their staff ways that this may be useful in terms of designing meaningful student learning objectives, or SLOs, as well, part of our short-term plan.
Again, one of the other things that we're using to immediately make some changes in the classroom, and I love this slide, and I wanted it to be included because I'm very visual, and I think that this is a slide that it's easy to read. So what you're noticing is, I mean, PARC is one of those tests that's given across multiple states. So when you look at the red, let me back up a little bit. This is particularly English 10 assessment. So it's looking at the English 10 assessment, and along the bottom, you're seeing all of the standards that were assessed. Okay? And then based on those standards, what you're looking at, the red are how students scored across the multiple states in which this test is given. The blue is the state of Maryland, and the green is the district. So for me, it's very easy, and for our teachers, it's very easy to look at this and to see where we are above that blue and red line and where we are below. And it kind of gives us an idea by standard where we need to either continue our efforts because it's working, or we need to visit it. Like, for example, the one that stands out, I mean, immediately is if you look at number 33 across the bottom. You can see that there's a big dip across states. That's that triangle that goes downward. But you can see the dot on number 33, the green dot is at the bottom. So that tells us it's glaring that that's an area of informational text that we need to do better on. What I like about it is if you were to see the next page, it actually has all of those standards kind of listed out for us, so we can tell, this is even though it's given in English 10, it's basically a disciplinary literacy test, which means how do you read and write across the curriculum? Okay, so for example, we can tell, is this a literature issue? Is this a social studies issue? Is it a technical subjects issue, which for us is like the CTE, the science, or is it a social studies issue? I think I said that. But anyway, it gives us an idea and which teacher team to kind of go to and say, all right, here's, do we start to see over the years, do we see any patterns? So I really like that slide. The one thing that this allows us to do is, you've heard us talk several times about PLCs, and basically these are teacher teams. So based on whatever kind of goal that you're looking to accomplish is how you organize your teachers. It might be by department, it might be by content, it might be by grade level, heck, it might be interdisciplinary based on whatever goal you're after. So we can take, for example, this particular chart. Our English teachers would go back and they'll say, okay guys, let's look at our data. Where are we doing well? Which I can tell that they're doing well in their literacy, which means they're reading the right kind of text. I can tell that they're picking those choices that they're doing well on that. Keep doing it. Where are some places that we're not doing so well? And by the way, let's sit and look at our grade level or our content classroom analysis and see, did anybody do well in this area? Because if you did, can you tell me what you were doing? If we didn't, if we all did hit the mark, then we need to obviously revisit and revise. The other thing that comes into play is you've heard us talk over the last couple of years of these things called curriculum scrolls. So it's basically, all right, if you can imagine, big long piece of chart paper mapped out by September, October, November, December, all the way through. You take all of these standards, you kind of put them in, when are you teaching them throughout the year? And you kind of go back and you look at this and you say, okay, well, you know, it looks like we're not doing so well on this particular standard. Let's go back to that scroll or that curriculum map and see why. Oh, you know what? We taught that in October and we didn't touch it again, and we tested in May. So that could be a clue. Or, oh, hey, well, look, we did well on this, but can you see we came back and revisited this 3 or 4 times throughout the school year? So those are the types of things that you can kind of determine when you sit back at those teacher teams and look at those curriculum scrolls. So if you hear us talk about scrolls, that's basically what they are. And I think a couple of things that, you know, in terms of looking at this, actually, you know what, I'm going to hang on to that thought. I'm going to hang on to it until we start talking about the good stuff, okay? I'm going to hang on to it. I'll come back with it.
Why don't you let me jump in?
Yes, I'll jump in. There you go.
This year, something different we're doing. We had the evidence tables last year as well, but this year, our coaches have already started creating the sample document that you see on the next slide. And basically, what they're doing is item by item, they're going through to look at which standards, where the students performed high, where the students really sort of fell right in line with the state, and where they struggled the most. This document on the left-hand side allows you to see actually the level of performance. The next column over will identify the specific standards, but on the right-hand side is something that really excites both our coaches, our principals, and our teaching staff. Because on the right-hand side, you actually see samples from PARC released items of what that looks like on the assessment. And we have not been able to do this before. So we're very excited that, again, we take very seriously, and here is an actual next step that is starting to happen right now.
Okay, so you know, what we've talked about are things that immediately we're doing at the classroom level, which, you know, hopefully we should see the gains from that. So in terms of long-term, you've heard us say this before, but teacher retention and experience in that content, it's huge. And I think, you know, it's something that we have to pay attention to not only at the school level, it's something that we have to pay attention to at the district level, and that really all comes back to culture. And, you know, when you talk to, when you listen to Ed talk about exit interviews, people don't always leave for money. I've said to my high school kids, my parents, my teachers before, we spend a lot of time together, a lot of time. And, you know, our number one thing obviously is work and our academics, but you have to also have a good time where you work. You have to like to come to work. You have to like to come to school. And I think there is something to be said for that. And so that teacher retention piece, it does come down to culture. I believe that. We talk about resources. I think it's our responsibility, and I think for a small district, we do a pretty good job of making sure teachers have the resources that they need. But I'm going to tell you, for example, Algebra 1, we use Carnegie. It's a program. It's a resource that we have. But you saw our test results. If you don't have a good teacher in that classroom, or a teacher that has the expertise and the content, and Jeff, you know this, it doesn't matter what program you're using. It is not a magic solution. It comes down to good teaching. Yes, they have to have the resources, but they also have to have solid instruction. I think, again, this piece with the consolidation, it's going to give us a chance to put our money where our mouth has been over the last couple of years. We've consolidated. I think if you look at some examples, where we do have some strong teacher teams, PLC teams working, it is working. We are showing progress. So it'll be for the first time that you're actually in the same building going to be able to have first grade teachers work together, second grade teachers work together. So I believe that's going to make a difference. I really do. Again, the coaches. We do have coaches in most of our schools. And I think the important piece when we interview and we fill those positions, I think they need to be filled with people that have either an English background or a math background, and not just, I don't mean to say, just a good teacher. It's got to be somebody that's got that content knowledge. And you've got to keep those people at the grade level and contents for multiple years so they can get good at it. And then the last thing, of course, Gina mentioned that MAP assessment. That's something that we've been able to use grades 3 through 9 over this past year. And I think based on what Gina has noticed and our teachers have noticed, that while that test may not look exactly like PARCC, it is a pretty daggone good indicator of how our kids are going to do. And I think that also when you tie teacher SLOs or their learning objective, that's where their accountability comes in. You tie it to that data, there is nowhere to hide. So I think again, those may be kind of big and broad, but I think there are definitely some action steps that could be taken in these long-term plans. So Gina's going to come up next and talk about some of the places that we did see points of progress, because we've kind of talked about our challenges, we've talked about short-term plans, long-term plans, and let's just end on a nice note in terms of where we did see some points of progress.
So I think I'm very excited to share that within individual schools and individual classrooms, there are some great things that happened and things we need to celebrate. For example, at Garnett Elementary School, students doubled third grade math proficiency. They went from 23 students to 45 students meeting or exceeding the target. The same 2 teachers will be teaching third grade at Garnett this year. The same grade level again. They almost jumped for joy. They will also be sharing their best practices with other third grade teachers across the district as part of our Math Academy. Millington Elementary School, grade 3, moved math scores from 74, meeting levels 3, 4, and 5, to 100% of the students scoring a 3, 4, or 5. This is significantly above the state average of 67%. One of our most experienced teachers at that level helped move those students in that direction. At Galena Elementary School, students moved from 30 to 48 percentage points. That's an 18% increase in mathematics. A recent retiree was the teacher. Again, at Wharton Elementary School, we saw significant increases in students in 4th and 5th grade English language arts. A very strong 4th and 5th grade team of teachers with extensive experience in that grade level. In 4th grade, the students moved 19 percentage points, and in 5th grade, they moved 24 percentage points. That's statistically significant. We're very proud of the points of progress, and again, when you're small, I think it's important that you recognize your challenges, but also recognize that great things are happening in Kent County Public Schools.
So just very quickly, when you look at secondary, Dr. Couch really already kind of talked about this, but your Algebra 1 and your Algebra 2 students, in the past we have really kept this to our STEM students. And for the first time, we actually went beyond that, testing the students that we thought were very capable, and they proved us to be very capable. So Algebra 1 at the middle school level, you've only had 2 students not pass the PARCC exam, and in terms of the Algebra 2 at the high school, you only had 1. So I think we're doing, in terms of teachers having a pretty good idea based on their benchmarks that they're using in the buildings, they have a pretty good idea of how students are going to do on those assessments before they get to it. The other thing, just briefly, mentioning the high school English, I mean, nobody is more crushed than I am that we went from 82% to 72%. number 2 in the state, down to about 12 in the state in terms of rankings. And who knew that 10 percentage points was going to drop us that much, which tells you how tight the competition is between those first top scores. They're very tight. But the one thing I will say that I will stand by is a couple of things that we've put in place in terms of that English, what we call Tier 2 intervention. It's basically what I was going to talk about before. I think we have an excellent model of every 6 to 8 weeks, our English teachers sit and they go through every single student in that building, and they look at their reading scores and their writing scores based on how they're doing across the curriculum. And they group those students not by grade level, but based on where they're doing either well or where they're not doing so hot. And so, every Friday, each period of the day, and I knew you can speak to this, you have your writer's workshop. And it's not based on what grade you're in, it's based on where you're doing well or where you're not. And you're in there for a significant amount of time to be able to work on some of those standards that you're not doing well on. One of the things we noticed and we put in midway through the year was we could tell based on our benchmarks that our scores were not going to be as high as they were last year. We just weren't sure exactly where we would fall in the rankings. But we put in something that we called touchstones, and it's about reading. Because, if you think about a sports team, how do you get good? You practice. Do you put a player out on the field in a position that they're not ready for? You don't. Or you try not to. Same thing with the reading and writing. I mean, it's so very simple and so very basic. If you want to be good at this stuff, then you have to read, and you have to write, and you have to do it often, and you have to do it across the curriculum. And so I think that's something that we've tried to put in place at that secondary, at the high school, that we need to put also in place at the middle school level. I think we're seeing results there. And the other thing, the last thing, and I know I'm sorry, I'm passionate about the high school, I'm sorry. We have a co-teaching team that I would put up against anybody. And that is our very neediest kids are together with a special educator and a general educator, and I'm telling you, if you didn't know who they were, you wouldn't know which was which. And I think that is also a pretty significant model, but you have to have the right combination of people to do it. So with that, I'll let you finish up.
Basically, as Tracy said, reading and writing matter. Don't forget that important feedback goes hand in hand with that, and that's what the teachers are doing. So when they get together and they look at what the student has done in terms of written work or speaking or listening, any of the skills they're working on, it's that specific feedback that they get that will help move them forward. The bottom line is we want you to hear us say moderate performance is not good enough. And there is a sense of urgency, but there is also a sense of hope and belief that we can turn the curve and make this the best year ever. So with that, we'll take any questions.
And we know we were long-winded. Thank you.
Sorry.
Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Can I just think on the teacher retention piece, I'm very pleased to see kind of the upfront engagement. I've heard a lot about kind of what's been happening in the system. Are we checking, and I guess this probably goes to Mr. Silver as well, are we checking in throughout that first year and second year and potential third year with these potential teachers to understand where their pressure points are, what are the touch points, what are we not providing for them? I mean, I fear that, do they get lost in a different place, and then we find out they're going elsewhere. We know there's always going to be movement back to their home state or wherever they may be from. But I just want to understand better what the touch points are and how much are we engaged with those new teachers, other than the education side. I mean, from a human resource side, do we understand where they are?
Sure. In formal and informal ways. I mean, we meet with our new teachers monthly. There's times that we ask them for some formal feedback. We do surveys, we do those things just to be able to see that. But I think more importantly is the informal. I mean, it's something that's a concerted effort by many people to look out for them, to ask them questions. I get into buildings and I'm always talking to new teachers. You know, the supervisors and principals are doing the same thing. Some of the principals have started chat and choose, times, informal times to get together to talk to them. We also have a tremendous mentoring program, and our mentors provide us with feedback as well, where we're succeeding, where we're not succeeding. But things like our exit surveys are really critical for us to really understand. We don't like it, so we do what are called stay surveys. We don't want to wait till they're gone and then find out the autopsy data. What we want to do is we want to find out halfway through where they're struggling. So we'll do that as well.
Now, that's great to hear. I think it's important for us to kind of keep a pulse all the way through.
Who are your mentors? Who are its mentors?
Our mentors are retired teachers. Probably about 2/3 of them can't count public school, but we've also brought in some dynamic teachers from other systems and other states who have come into this area and are working with our teachers.
Good.
Well, I don't mean to sound negative. It's the beginning of the year is always a nice time when people are very, happy about the new year starting and everything. But I'm concerned that our test scores have been low for a long time, and we always sort of hear plans to change things. But what I never hear are just simple things like these kids need to read a lot more, not a little more. They need to read a lot more, and that means getting parents to understand how important it is that their kid might want to be a veterinarian, but if in 6th grade he or she can't read, he's probably not going to be one. And I think we have to really let parents know that, everything matters in school, and this is serious. It would be an interesting study to find out, I don't know how you do it, but hundreds of children went through the public library's summer reading program. And when I was in the library, I saw some people taking out armloads of books, bags of books. And I bet you all those kids got a 4 or a 5. And it's getting high scores has much more to do with just how much people read. Just like you said, Ms. Williams, it's practice. And you can't do this all in a school day. You have to do it at home. Kids spend, 30 hours a week on, texting and stuff. Parents need to see that that's just not going to lead to success. And they have to be partners with the schools. These school days are so jam-packed tight with things that we have to do. I think the school day should be longer, but that's not a local decision. But one thing we might do is make a contract and ask parents to sign that contract at the beginning of each year. And the contract has to do with how much reading they do, and maybe writing, math practice at home. But I think they're just not engaged enough with the schools. And so, until we do that, I think we're going to continue to have these low scores.
Well, and it's more than just reading, it's reading independently.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily being always read to, it's being able to read it independently.
Right. And I think if parents would realize that, for a little kid, 7 or 8 years old, 20 minutes a night makes a huge difference. And everybody can do that.
I just want to add that one of the programs that we offer at the elementary level is Scholastic Reading Counts, and we can actually track the number of books that students read, and it is not a required program. It is something that we can share in terms of some schools do use other programs. Some schools choose to use that program. The ones that do choose to use it, it's interesting to see because you can actually track the number of books students are reading.
Well, and I also think the One School, One Book has been an incredible program that has been supported by the community in terms of, you got to get kids to love reading, and sometimes it's that engagement as a school where kids understand, that everybody's reading the same book, and that, I think that was incredibly motivating for our kids as well. So we need to do more of that. That's something we can do within our schools.
Yeah, I think that's really good too.
I'll just be real quick. First of all, I applaud you because I use data a lot. I have to be honest with you, you can manipulate this, because people can manipulate data, but you came right out and you just said it like it is. You gave the hardcore facts, but then you also gave some of the great things that are happening. So I applaud you for that. You were dead straight honest about all this. So thank you for that. The other thing is, as you mentioned earlier, one of the big things was a big push for me when we were doing consolidation was the fact that for years we did not have teaming. We had one teacher per grade. There was no teaming. There was no sharing information. There are great teachers, and there are good teachers, and those great teachers can take those good teachers and make them great by teaming. So I think, and I believe this sincerely, I think in the next 2 or 3 years, even as early as this year, I think we'll start seeing the results from the fact that now that we've consolidated, we're going to have teachers who are teaming now, and that's going to help kids. So thank you. That's my quick move.
Mr. Williams? Going to consolidation, it kept coming up about collaboration. And this summer, I had 2 teachers from 2 different elementary schools in our system come to the farm, and they were in the store buying some products, and they were talking to me about the excitement of being able to collaborate because they taught the same subjects and they were going to be in the same building, and I was like just questioning about it, and they kept coming back to the point of how important it was because they were the only teacher in their school that was teaching that subject, that grade. So they can bounce things off each other, like everybody's been saying, to read, so I'm not in the classroom, I'm not a teacher, so apparently hopefully that will matter because they were very excited about having somebody to work with.
I don't want anybody to take this personally, because I'm not saying that we have bad teachers, but I'm saying that I felt like I heard a lot of excuses tonight. Just taking ownership of bad scores doesn't do it. These stats have been out for 2 months, so we already knew they were terrible. I don't understand all the acronyms, PLOs, PLC, but I do understand 4% of our 8th graders getting a 4 or 5. That's a number I understand. You pointed to the successes of Millington and Wharton Elementary School. Those teachers didn't have any collaboration, and we closed those 2 schools. So I'm very optimistic that collaboration is going to make a difference and going to make our scores go up. I'm hearing the tremendous turnover we have at the middle school. That's not a new phenomenon. That's been happening for years. I'm looking at...
The scores have been what they've been for years.
Yeah, well, but why I'm not calling you out on it.
Right.
I'm trying to dial it back. I don't get this, Sometimes people say, well, we're a small school and 1 or 2 numbers and I know they can jack up a score, but you know what? If we're going to buy into the fact that we're an impoverished county and we're a small county, then that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. There are a lot of schools in this country that are small and poor, and they're outperforming the bigger and richer schools. We got to do a better. There's just no doubt about it. We got to do a better job. We got our rear ends ripped last week because we had failed in getting kids to school on time and safely. And you know what? Our kids deserve a better education. I'm embarrassed. I mean, we're 7th and 8th on the shore of 9 counties. I mean, we have got to do a better job. I'm not an educator. I don't know what to do about it. But we talk about the turnover at the middle school, and you talk about it being a culture thing. How about the kids who went through our public schools and come back here and apply for jobs, and we don't hire them? Let me tell you what, when we hired one this year, we hired one last year, but there's been a long line of kids. We can look at other school districts on the Eastern Shore and know that there are Kent County kids there. When those kids come back to Kent County, they're making an investment in here. They're not going to leave you. They're not going to be a teacher that comes here for a year and finds out that there's no social life, there's nothing to do, and they're going to leave us. You know what? That's a culture. These kids know what Kent County's like. I'm looking at 3 personnel people we approved last week for resignations. 2 of them were long-term. 1 of them held a very significant position, and they all went to Delaware. They signed a contract. They basically broke their contracts, and they left us. You know, we've got to hire the right teachers, and we've got to keep the right teachers. And I don't know whose responsibility that is, but obviously it comes down to who's teaching our kids. I just, you know, I'm looking at you, Tracy, it's not your fault. You know, I'm just saying that it's, you know, like the map thing. I was all excited last year when we were told that, you know what, 3 times during the course of a year we can track a kid's progress. Right. I thought, great, that's a chance to intervene a little bit and turn things around. Or the quote, I love this one, it's a pretty good daggone indicator of how they are going to perform. Well, if we know how they're going to perform, why don't we improve that before the test comes? Those are just questions that I'm hopeful that this time next year I don't have to ask again. Thank you for my rant.
If I can just add one piece, I know that earlier Mr. Getz had asked about new teachers and the support they need, and I know that in my visitations with teachers, both experienced and new, it is critical to have someone available on a regular basis within the schools to support our teachers in terms of feedback with instruction and strategies and what is and is not working. And I just think in long term, that's something we need to tuck away. When we turned the curve years ago, we had many folks supporting people on a more regular basis within the schools. Just food for thought. Again, our intention, we thought long and hard about how to present this. Bottom line, we're not accepting this either. This is not a point of pride for any of us. However, I do think the commitment is there, and in terms of changes, I don't feel like it's the same thing. I hear you, and I'm trying to process what you're saying. I do feel like there are,
it's just,
right. It is not acceptable.
You're disappointed,
right?
Because everybody in this room is invested in the school system, and there are so many things that play into, for example, why we have low enrollment. You know, I mean, we have to make our schools attractive, and one of the best selling points is success. You know, I'm surprised that we only had the few number of kids that transferred out this year. I mean, I was pleasantly surprised that the kids we lost primarily went to another public school in another jurisdiction, which told me they moved, which is nothing we have control over, unless they moved because they were disappointed in the education they were getting. And we all know of at least, I'm sure we all know somebody that just went over the bridge to get into a school district they think that's better than ours. I'm not saying that we have a bad school system. What I'm saying is we got some really bad test scores.
I wish I could stand here and talk to you about some of the other scores, like our CTE scores, our first time HSA scores, because they're better. I mean, it's, you know, you're looking at it again, well, I mean, it's going to sound.
And I don't want to make, I mean, I'm looking at you like it's your fault,
No,
and it's not. It's just that you guys, unfortunately, were the messengers.
One thing I think we should try to do is intervene really early when kids are having trouble with reading, and you know, really put resources there. Use community members where we can, or hire tutors. But you know, I have a 6-year-old grandson in California, and after 2 weeks in first grade, the teacher called his parents and said, we're going to do an intervention because he's not where he should be in reading after 2 weeks. And because they don't want anybody to be behind at the end of first grade. The trouble I see here with these scores is it's just so cumulative. If kids aren't doing well in these basic things in third grade, they're really not going to be doing very well in eighth grade. And we really have to intervene. We can't just say, oh, well, maybe they'll get better. They're not unless there's a real intervention. And I think we have to really get serious with parents to let them know exactly, maybe how bad things are if they have a child who's not doing any work. And also really misbehaving. I think something that we really have to address is how much disruption we are going to allow in classes by, one disruptive child. That child isn't just wasting an hour of his or her time, he's wasting 24 other kids' time. And we shouldn't allow that to happen. And I know there are a lot of rules and things we have to obey, but I just think we need to make sure that class time is practically sacred. And we need to really respect that, the teacher should be able to run a class without interruptions from any child or any adult.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for letting us take so much of the board meeting tonight, but this is really the heart of what we're doing.
Thank you. Administrative Services, Ms. Towers.
Good evening again. Attached is the monthly expenditure reports and revenue ending August 31st for your review. It's for information only, no action is required. Is there any questions or?
Any questions and comments? Thank you. Capital Improvement Plan?
Okay, I'll take that. The board has before you our capital improvement plan. This is required, an annual update that's required every year. And it includes, there's a number of things in the capital improvement plan that say TBA, to be announced. Those are items that will be filled in through the work of the Strategic Planning Committee, the Facilities Strategic Planning Committee, and looking at our facilities and making determination on what are the most salient projects that need to be moved forward in the plan.
So is this just for information?
No, it requires your approval.
Who's on this committee?
That we approved that committee a couple of months ago.
That's the committee?
Yes.
Okay.
Ms.
Yeah. Okay.
Sullivan is on that committee as well.
I thought it was a different.
So it requires your approval.
Right, okay. So there's nothing, this is a 5-year plan, it's not for, okay.
And
Has there
it's-
been years where we didn't have anything, we put, I don't want to say deferred maintenance, but there were years when the board didn't have anything, any projects?
Correct.
So, okay.
And so we were able to knock some things off, including the parking lots, the HVAC replacement at Garnett, the football field. I mean, those are the kinds of facility type improvements we're moving forward with. And you'll see that Galena's HVAC and roof replacement is the next project that's coming up.
Yeah.
But, what I would say with this particular capital improvement plan, when we had Aramark in the district, the Board of Ed contracted with them an assessment, a facilities assessment, and that really is very much outdated. So I think that this facilities strategic planning committee is going to help us in terms of really understanding the where we need to go facilities wise, and then what are buildings going to be used for in the future. So I think that this is what I would say is it's a very fluid plan, and it changes from year to year depending upon what our priorities are.
But most of these things are to be decided.
I know, that's because they're
They're still meeting.
That would be impacted by what the committee brings forward to the Board of Ed, and we would update it accordingly. We didn't want to put things in there that made no sense, or we didn't really understand where they fit in the timeline. So that's why there's to be determined. But it's required, we have to turn it in October, so we're, you know, this has to be turned in, even if we don't have deadlines and dates.
Is the capital improvement plan always a 5-year?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and it's constantly changing.
Okay.
And it really helps impact what funding we're going to be able to access in future years.
Any other questions?
This is submitted to the commissioners, the county commissioners, and then up to the state.
Right, county commissioners have to approve the plan because obviously they're part of the funding source that we would have for these major capital improvement projects.
Presenting it to them tomorrow night?
Yes, we'll talk to them tomorrow night, and then it's going to submit it. They've already agreed to and have budgeted for the Galena roof and HVAC. Yeah, that's in their budget for FY19. But, you know, we're in the process of the feasibility study, looking at do we just want to redo what's already there, or do we want to look at other projects that could be incorporated into that plan? So we've got some time.
All right. Are there any other questions? The administration recommends the approval of the 2019-2024 capital. Looking for a motion. So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any questions or comments? I call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. It's unanimous. Budget adjustment amendment, excuse me.
The next item is a budget amendment for restricted. We're in the process of closing out FY17, and there's addition of 2 grants, the preventative addiction grant and literacy grant, and there are some small changes in Title I, teacher quality, 21st century, some special ed, infants and toddlers and duty center that we've had to take into account to reconcile out at the end of the year for restricted.
What are you doing with the literacy grant?
That's already been spent out, but it had to be recorded on the books because we received the funds in the spring.
Are there other questions? Dr. Costa? Do you have any more questions? Well, I'm just wondering what they did with the money.
That was the grant we did, the mini grant we did for, remember with the chest and.
Oh, yeah, that's your,
So.
oh,
we
it's
did have-
teacher grant, that was your stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, my gosh. I didn't think of it as a grant.
It was well, we consider that as.
Okay, yes.
From local sources, yes.
Comments? The administration recommends the approval of budget amendment number 2 for the restricted fund fiscal year 2017.
Make a motion to approve the budget amendment number 2 for restricted fund FY17.
Is there a second? Second. Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. Budget amendment number 2, unrestricted.
Okay, this is the last piece in closing out 17. It's the unrestricted piece. There were some adjustments since budget amendment number 1 that were changes to the unrestricted fund, and it was basically due to out-of-county living arrangements, some aging school funding, and then we had to reclass some things so we can allocate towards program costs, and then the student with out-of-county living expenditures.
How many students, is that what it is, the out-of-county living arrangements, and it was more than just transportation, it was a student was placed in like a residential?
Not residential, out of county in a different county that they're still considered Kent County residents, but
Okay.
that we actually owe that piece to that county.
Right, I got you. I remember that conversation.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there questions, comments? The administration recommends the approval of budget amendment number 2 for unrestricted fiscal year 2017.
Make a motion to approve budget amendment number 2 for unrestricted funds for fiscal year 17.
Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any comments or any more questions? Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous, Mrs. Unitas.
And this closes out all of the budget adjustments to close out FY17.
budget amendment number 1, unrestricted fiscal year 2018.
Right, moving into 18, we have our first budget amendment, and that is to increase our transportation using fund balance of $175,000.
From what I thought I understood Dr. Couch to say earlier tonight, does that mean we've exhausted our fund balance?
It comes very close.
Well,
to
yeah,
where we're-
we'll still have some that will be identified in the closeout for the audit, but this is all we can legally bring into. at this
So are
issue.
we required to maintain a minimum amount? I mean, I'm just curious, what do you think we will have after we pull this over, if you can guess?
Under 2 million. We are only able to bring in at this time a little over $980,000 until we're closed out for fiscal year 17. That's all we're legally able to bring in at that moment.
Is there, when you say illegal, is it because there's a percentage or there's a cap on what you're allowed to bring in?
Because it's actually restricted. It's restricted fund balance. In fund balance, you have 2 types, restricted and unrestricted.
Correct.
So the unrestricted from fiscal year 16 was $985,000. So that is up to the amount that we can bring in legally until we're closed out for fiscal year 17.
Okay. Gotcha. Does anybody else have a question? The administration recommends the approval of budget amendment number 1 for unrestricted fund fiscal year 2018.
Make a motion that we approve budget amendment number 1 for unrestricted funds fiscal year 18.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions, comments? Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Alrighty, the Galena Elementary School playground equipment update.
First off, I want to start about explaining QZAB funds. QZAB funds are federal funds, and they are funds that are restricted just for the use of building and equipment related. And this summer, Dr. Couch and I have been able to bring in $180,000. The paving projects were $150,000, and this is an extra $30,000. And this is utilizing rescinded funds, QZAB funds. So we bring to you tonight approval for game time to have playground equipment at Galena totaling $30,000. That's all we were able to secure. Attached is the piggyback contract that we like to piggyback off of, along with the design.
When's it going to be built?
Once we get approval, we'll have to contact the vendor and get on their list. But it'll be a couple months.
And this is the only vendor, right? So this isn't something we had to
This
bid
is
at?
the only one for piggyback that we were able to utilize. I mean, if, obviously we could put out for other vendors, but, piggybacking means they've already gone through the RFP process and we can utilize that little bit.
Now, are we doing this at Galena to compensate somewhat for the playground equipment we had to leave behind at Millington Elementary? Okay. Are we exploring any other options to increase the playground equipment at Garnett or Rock Hall? Especially Garnett, because they gained over 100 students with consolidation.
Right, with Garnett, they're requesting that they get a concrete or asphalt pad out there
Who's
for the older
requesting that?
students.
The school
principal,
itself is
yes.
asking? Okay.
Yes. Because of the older students, they use that more than the playground equipment. Garnett received in 2010 playground equipment, so they're not eligible for QZAB funding for a couple more years. But like I said, the principal and the school is asking for that. We're in the process now of soliciting bids, and we should have at least 2 quotes shortly.
So that would be basketball and other kinds of ball.
Mr. Reed? Questions, comments? The administration requests favorable approval by the board to award game time playground equipment in the amount of $30,000. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve game time to build the playground at Galena.
Second?
Second.
Questions, comments? Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous, just unanimous. Did anyone else
Thank you. They're useful comment cards because the instructions on the back are helpful for me to keep my comments to 3 minutes. And I want to do that. I want to start off by congratulating you all. I think that it's very clear that this meeting ran a lot differently than a week ago. And the room looks a lot different. The participation is a lot different. I think the Board of Education and their administrators and the parents and all of the schools, the whole schools, moved together to straighten out something that you all referred to as an emergency. For that, I think you deserve a lot of congratulations. What I heard tonight was a giant sigh of relief, and that seems very appropriate. I'm happy for my kindergartner that the year is moving forward and that hopefully the county is going to be in a little bit better shape now. So thank you all for your participation and your stick-to-itness with that. I want to particularly thank SOS, the Support Our Schools group, and the community wide, beyond the parents, who made certain that this was something that was driven forward. And that's my reminder to everyone that I think that we need to stay in this. And tomorrow night I'd like to see parents in particular. I'd like to see members of the Board of Education. I'd like to see the general public of Kent County coming out to the County Commissioners meeting and being heard, because I think that what we've really realized is that it comes down from the County Commissioners. So I heard that sigh of relief, but that sigh was accompanied by the air going out of the room. And whether it's intentional or not, I think that this meeting didn't provide for the robust participation and engagement that's needed. I think keeping people here is what's needed, and this meeting was another indicator of how people feel lessened in their participation. I attended the strategic long-term property planning meeting, which was good. It had very limited participation, but that was one of the things that came up, was increasing participation in Kent County, and I think it's very important that the people who are interested continue to be embraced by this board and understand how they can participate and where they can participate. So the air went out of the room, but we need the air back. We need a path to engagement. I have to say that I wear reading glasses. I don't have them right now. There were times tonight that I just saw a screen, but I couldn't read any words on it. I would encourage us to make certain that either there are handouts or that things are in a way that people can get the information. I think getting the information is key in democracy, and we need that. But I want to do a quick playback of what I heard, because one of the things that I heard that is really important right now is that there's this enormous strategic facilities plan that's coming forward. And I think if we went back over the 20 years of declining test scores or the 50 years of declining schools or whatever it is that people can capture and bring into this room, what they would find is that the outlay of funds has been pretty consistent. Every school that I go around to, it says renovated in, built by. You know, the money has been going into the facilities, but the scores don't reconcile that. So I would want to caution our community that before we sign off on $60 million in a new school or $80 million in new programs or whatever it's going to be, that we consider what we're actually looking for, which is the whole child. And when we're not dealing with that whole child, or when that whole child's not exiting this system, it's problematic. So while I really am encouraged that you all reconciled the budgetary issues that were so important and that drove the last couple of weeks of mishap, it doesn't reconcile the bigger issue, which is the second half of the meeting. I'm just trying to do a playback of what I heard, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but at one point, I think I heard, am I right, a 100% fail? So that's the Board of Education hearing a report from itself that in English language arts, at one point during the presentation, there was a 100% fail. So if I was a student in the school system today, okay, if there wasn't a 100% fail, there were consistent declining measures. And thank you, Trish, for recognizing that, because I thought that was really important that someone on the board said, what I'm hearing here and what I'm seeing here is that our students aren't measuring up to where we think they ought to be. We're teaching to the test, and we're failing the test. Forget about the rest of the student. So on the one hand, I have a child in the school system. So today, I am putting my child in this failed system. Now, I want to just say, again, what I said last week, which is I'm actually here to encourage you. I want to work with you. I think we're all recognizing there's amazing teachers in the system and there's really great principals. Our principal, Principal Rose, has put in so much time. She was here tonight. She deserves recognition, and that school deserves recognition. It's the school of Chestertown, which is the engine of our county. You know, it might also be the school that is leading the system in dragging down scores. But that's on you, that's not on them. And it's certainly not on the students, because the students, we know students can do great things. So the first question is, if I was a student in this system, how would I feel finding out that my school system just got a 100% fail? Second question is, if I was a prospective parent, a new family just moved to Chestertown, considering involving myself in the public school system, sort of like my family did, would I want to put my kids in that? So one of my questions is, where are we today? You know, I do a little bit with real estate, and I always look at these school ranking things. And I've watched when I bought Kent County, you know, it was a 6 and a 7, trickling down, now it's a 3. What's our number on a 1 to 10 today? What are people getting out there? What's the measure that people get? I think measures are, cultural competency is a term that comes from someone here in Kent County. I thought that was amazing. Because cultural competency apparently is something that we really need to work on, because it's something that I'm going to share a brief story and then I'm going to keep it to my 3 minutes. I have an uncle, he's 83 years old, he's an old minister, former banker. He's from Charleston, South Carolina, so he speaks in Proverbs. He says funny things, and he told me when my son was 3, he said, you know, educating a child is pretty straightforward. Read to them and give them a love of reading. And they will read their whole lives. They'll never be afraid of the word. He said, and then teach them Monopoly. Because if they get math, they can do anything. If they have math and reading, they can do anything. So if that's sort of an 83-year-old from Charleston's point of view, and we're teaching to the test, how close are we getting to his measure? In other words, I just want to know what's the fundamental that my child's going to get, because I don't send my child to Garnett Elementary School for reading or for math. I'm going to play Monopoly with him, and I read to him, and he's a vigorous reader. But I send him there for cultural competency, and that's the thing that I find is one of the things that is the most dramatic in the last couple of weeks. So there was a lot of drama in the last couple of weeks, and we can look at the school bus and the busing and the contracting and the contractors, and I think there's a lot of stuff that went on there. And I think that's all very real stuff. I think it's really important that we recognize all of that. But there's another element underneath it that was never addressed, because it can't be addressed because we're not at a stage yet as a county where we're willing to address it, but it's the reason the scores are dragging. The scores aren't dragging because these children aren't all born with God's gift to learn, or that parents don't love their children or want to read to them, or any of the other things we might fall into thinking about. It doesn't have anything to do with that, but it has to do with something else. So I think you're very correct in saying, if a teacher has a disruptive classroom environment, and the way that that teacher engages that environment causes rippling test failures, then we have a major problem here. So I know that I brought up some critical things, and they might sound critical, but in reality, I think it's a terrific school system. I really do. I think tests aside, I think it's a terrific school system because you have the right ingredients to go forward. You have parent enthusiasm. Now, what I'd like to see is I'd like to see community enthusiasm, and that's your job. You know, that's the Chamber of Commerce job. That's the church's job. I'd like to see more people buying in. Why is Chestertown not lined up supporting the middle school I mean, the town of Chestertown, our economic engine, and the mayor ought to be on top of this. When he's running for mayor, he's talking about building a yacht harbor. He's not talking about improving the schools, which are the engine of the future of this economy. Do we care about the economy? Invest in the students. So what I want to say one more time is that I appreciate you all being up there. It's not an easy thing to sit there and hear from the public. I wish there was more public. I think that the public needs to remain engaged. That's the one thing I really want to say, is that they made such a difference. What would have happened if they hadn't been in the room last week? What would we have done differently? And I think that's the reason why you all need to be making an active, intentional, collaborative engagement methodology part of your work. That you're always filling the room and that you're doing the right things. Outside of this room, what are ways that you could get students and parents in a fun, family, festive environment that sells them on Kent County schools? Because that's something I haven't seen yet. So I'm from this side of the Mason-Dixon line. I'm from the South, and I want to share with you that I think that there's an expression that I learned, but it took me a while to really realize what it meant, which is you can put lipstick on the pig, but you still have the pig. The test scores are the pig. And our students being left out are the biggest potential cancerous quality of the ongoing quality of life in this county. It matters to the retirees that are moving here. It matters to the investors that are moving here. It matters to the 301 corridor. I was at a community meeting with social services people in Queen Anne County last week, and someone said, well, 301's coming. The work is coming, the industry's coming, the investment's coming, and they're going to skip Kent County. They're coming here. You need to hear that, because the reason they're skipping Kent County, the primary reason that I know of. 3 minutes, thanks.
I suggest we get a clock.
Oh,
Keep this in order.
that's a great idea. Thank you very much, and thank you for what you do. And thank you.
So we're going to try to wrap this one up.
For the record,
Barbara,
I want to piggyback on some of the terms I've heard tonight about accountability, culture, and just thank you for firing Reliable. They didn't make the grade, so I'm glad that this past 2 weeks for my family has been a teachable moment where my sons were using character count skills of talking to the bus drivers, coming home saying my bus driver is really confused, they were lost, I can understand being lost in places like Chesapeake Landing. So it was those character count soft skills that I would say we use as a teachable moment for our kids. If it is true that a parent today boarded a bus and kids are on videotape cursing the bus drivers, I do want to support our newest Kent County employees of having the bus drivers come underneath your protective umbrella. So please hold these citizens, whether it's kids looking up to parents. And last Monday, I did not come here because I figured I didn't want to be here. I was frustrated with how I thought some of the board members sitting up here weren't respected, were actually bullied. There was a bit of a mob mentality. So I just pray that as a Kent County, we can be emotional. I get emotional when I get up here, but I want to be mindful of everyone's time. And then too, if I'm wrong, I'll say I'm sorry. But right now, I think there's some individuals in our community that I would be ashamed, and I'd want someone to come up to me like, is everything okay? Like, some people might need some anger management, and if they're breaking the laws, if we brought up Harvey, and right now there's people out looting when communities have been devastated. So I think our community has really hit the bottom where the meeting tomorrow for the county commissioners, I do hope we have public participation, but yet we need order, so I don't want to go over my 3 minutes. I respect everyone's time. I'll see you the rest of the week, and there's always teachable moments. So that's what I'm looking for, the good and where we can improve. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Mrs. Gilbert?
Hi, Hi, how are you? I'm nobody. I just got here in some ways in Kent County. I first came in '82 and built fires by the shores of the bay when you're allowed to do that, and cooked hot dogs over in Still Pond. That's when I first came to Kent County, but I didn't live here until just over the holidays. We moved here to Rock Hall. I'm somebody because we're a family who moved into Kent County this year with a 4th and 8th grade boys. And we were homeschoolers, and we finished out our year last year that way. And very kindly, your schools let us come in at the end of the year as students so that we could get to know things up close. It's a big transition when you've been homeschooled your whole life, lived out of the country for a while, and now you're in a new place and you're going to school full time. So that was very helpful to get to come in at the end of the year at Rock Hall Elementary and at the middle school. I visited 6 schools last year, public and private. I used to teach 4th through 8th grade. I taught in 3 different districts for 5 years. So the things that I think are coming from those viewpoints, I love living here, and I love Kent County for all the years that I've known it, working at a camp over in Still Pond and one now in Chester, and now living here. I think that even in light of all that's gone on recently, I definitely still love living here, and I love that you heard the people, and that the change that people were saying in the coffee shop couldn't happen because this decision had been made and we all had to accept it. You showed that you can change and you can make a different decision, and I really appreciate watching how you're working it out and how you're valuing what I've been learning to be the most important thing in Kent County, which is relationship. Knowing who my kid's going on the bus with in the morning means a lot to me, and mine are older. So I appreciate that you came back around to that top priority, which is knowing and knowing each other and being known in this county. I appreciate, Trish, what you said, because to me, as a mom and a teacher, you're saying you want the best for our kids, that you're not going to put lipstick on the pig and pretend like it's okay, and that it should be better. I got to talk to you about this before, and Dr. Couch, and a couple of the county commissioners. I'm sorry, Board, that I haven't met the rest of you before. I really seriously would love our county and our district to look into the future of K-8s. I would love to see community schools in 3 parts of the county, and I would love to keep our middle school kids a little closer so we can work on things like these terrible test scores and be up close and personal in that, and purposeful with intent in how we do it. I would love to see our kids not ride a bus over an hour. I really think sleep helps too. And I love that you mentioned the whole child. I'm sorry, I don't know you, but maybe he's gone. That's where I feel like we're failing our kids these days in general as a country. We're not losing kids in high school. The statistics will show you we're losing them in middle school. And anyone who lives here in Rock Hall knows that siren goes off a lot at that firehouse. And most of the time, it's people rushing to Narcan someone and hope that they make it. And I always wonder, as a camp counselor and then teacher for years and now parent, what I could have done for that young adult or adult when they were 11 or 12 so that we wouldn't have ever gotten to that point now. That's all I'll say to this. Thanks.
Thank you. Rebecca Harris-Smith.
This is kind of an extension of what Barbara Ann was saying. I have to pull up something on my phone. She had mentioned an incident on the bus today. And the way she said it, now I don't know if it's actually true because it was a post on Facebook, but the thing is, I feel like there's been a lot of these incidents, and I would really like it if there was a way to address it. So I'm going to go ahead and read the post. And this is public, so it's okay for me to share. I watched a parent throw rocks at the bus, throw what looked like a chain, beat the bus, cuss, and accuse the driver of stealing her daughter's book bag. It was all I could do not to get out of my car. I'm embarrassed for our community. My daughter hates this afternoon bus and said the kids keep calling the driver the N-word. She cried because she didn't want to go to school today, because she didn't want to ride that bus. I cannot believe what I witnessed, and I am appalled at such parental behavior, and she shared this publicly in an effort to get anybody else who may have seen it to call and report it. So here's what I was kind of hoping. There is something in the student handbook that my awesome friend Francois found. It is a crime to interfere with a bus driver by Kent County Public School policy. The privilege of riding a school bus can be temporarily or permanently revoked if the provisions of the school's transportation rules for students are violated. So my hope was that maybe some message can go out via email. I was thinking maybe, because I think we all know this isn't an isolated incident. Maybe if it was school specific, came from the principals, because I think most of our parents respect the principals, maybe that would help to kind of curb some of this that's happening before it gets worse. Because I would hate my kids to hear that word on this. I'm going to end it with
Can I have just 1 second? Can you come up? Just to tell us.
Going to, but I personally saw a video of what happened on this bus. Not off the bus, but on the bus. A parent got on the bus, shoved the bus driver, said things that were not nice. I think the kids have heard for 2 weeks parents upset and outraged, and I think you guys really need to make a move to these kids to let them know that they will respect these bus drivers. They might not know all these bus drivers, we might not know them all, we know some of them, but we need to respect them, and I think we've lost that in our kids with them hearing, what's going on. And I think you guys need to get out there now to the kids and say, okay, we've made a mistake, we're going to fix our mistake, but you're not going to feed off of what you've seen for the last 2 weeks, because I think that's what they're feeding off of. What happened on that bus was horrible. I didn't know the bus driver, I don't know the parent, I don't even care. It was horrible. To think I'd have to be a part of that community that does things like that, I want no parts of it. No parts of it. And I told my kids, you will never. It's not what we want our kids to be or do. So I don't know how you're going to get the word out there, but we need to get to these kids tomorrow and say, there's a price to pay for somebody who's going to disrespect the bus driver. What the kids were saying in the back of the bus while the mother's up there arguing and fighting with the bus driver, it can't happen. It can't happen, and the kids need to know that right now. And I think it's all stemming off of parents being irate and upset for 2 weeks, which I feel like we had a right to. But you guys made a move on it, and we need to let these kids in this community know, this is it, we're done. It's been fixed, it's gonna be fixed, we're working towards it, and you're gonna work with us.
Thank you. Wayne Starkey?
I think my answers have been, or my questions have been answered. But I have a second in your time after the meeting.
Me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Thank you.
Carl Harden?
Thank you, and I want to say there's a little comment tonight. Someone asked me, should we congratulate the school board for resolving this situation? My thoughts on that was, if someone breaks into my house and harms me and tears my house apart, and they go to court, and the judge tells them that they have to pay for my expenses for medical, and that they have to come in my house themselves and repair my house for all the damage they did, would I then go up to them and thank them? No, I wouldn't. I'm glad you all did work on this. I don't think you moved fast enough. I think it's ridiculous that we went for 2 weeks. What happened today on the school bus, there was no call for it. When all this was going on, I actually had to chase a bus down with my neighbor passing cars because there were so many kids, high school students standing on the corner, that we didn't have enough vehicles to take them all to school. A lot of them are Hispanic, their parents are at work, we had no way to get a hold of their parents. I wasn't going to take them to school without letting their parents know, because I don't do that. The kids that I did take several days to school, I know their parents, we've talked about it. If they ever need a ride, I'm there for them. A lot of us did take kids to school. It was, somebody said, well, you're looking hindsight 2020 because I said the school board shouldn't have contracted out to someone in Baltimore. I live on the Eastern Shore in King County. I'm not sure where you guys live. I live in a rural area. When I go over the bridge, it's a different world. People are different over there. They live different. They drive different. It's a complete different world. Why a contract was given to someone in Baltimore over the Bay Bridge, knowing that people that drive over the Bay Bridge every day end up in all kinds of delays getting to work, getting home from work. Sometimes the bridge is closed for wind restrictions. There's an accident on the bridge. To give a contract to Baltimore, to me, was the most ridiculous thing I ever heard. I think Dr. Couch and I spoke on the phone, and she told me about a concerted effort that she thought was going on in the county. I think that you all loved what happened last week because Mr. Dixon sat there and saw how outraged we were, and that helped you all get out of the contract with them. There are families leaving King County because of what happened the last 2 weeks. They said, as the ladies were saying earlier, scores are down, there's problems in the schools, and they said, this is it. I'm fed up with it. Ma'am, I'm not sure your name and I don't want to get it wrong, but you said the kids need to read more. Ms. Costa, you said kids need to read more. I agree with that, but the kids have computers. They have iPads. They don't even know how to read or write in cursive. I went and got my daughter a book offline for second graders to teach her how to read or write and read cursive. Because my son is 24 years old. This school system failed him. At 6th grade, there was so much chaos in the classrooms that he has my brain. He's not really great in school. My daughter is like her mother. My wife has several degrees and she's brilliant. She could sit and take all kinds of stuff in. I had to sit and study, and my son's the same way. But the kids don't have books anymore. They don't have that. So, I understand, yes, as parents, we buy them books. I buy my daughter books. One of the things is I heard the gentleman say that school's not fun. Well, I lived in Millington. Millington Elementary was fun. After my daughter left Millington, we went to many events at Millington that were great events that I don't see happening at other schools in the county. So by consolidating the schools, and I know that's a whole separate subject and it's done, but the name Millington kept coming up, Millington Elementary. Millington Elementary was an incredible school for many years. When my son left there, I was devastated because I didn't know what it was going to hold for him in the middle school, and we ended up having to put him in private school. I want to thank Mr. Wheeler. He's the only one that called me from the school board that when he called, I actually felt like he cared. And this is his first year on the job. And I understand that she was on vacation and the lady that left the school actually helped him on Labor Day weekend with some problems with the school bus route. And I think he's doing the best job he can possibly do. He's just thrown into a huge mess. We consolidated schools, we changed bus companies all in 1 year. It's like the school board said, let's see how chaotic we can make it for our children. 1, 2, 3, go! And that's what happened. I think you've all failed. I still would like to see every one of you voted out. I know Miss Dr. I can't even think your name, Dr. Couch. I know you vote her in, so we have no say over her. But I think you all extremely failed. And I agree with the lady that stood and said, you all need to make a statement. There needs to be a robocall out. A child brought a table knife to school one day. And I got a robocall saying that a child brought a knife to school, and I asked my daughter, and she said it was a table knife. That's fine. And I believe you should let parents know. But we've got parents that are threatening bus drivers. The day I tracked a bus driver down, I got on the bus. I told the lady that she missed some children. I said, ma'am, I said, this is not your fault. I said, it's the fault of your bosses and our board that hired an outside company from Baltimore that doesn't know our community, and the fact that you didn't get to drive your route before, do a dry run before school started. Every day I stand out with my daughter and I wave to the bus drivers. When they come by, I wave to them, because the bus drivers, some of them are bad, and I believe you've gotten rid of some of them. Some of them have been kids that have come home where they have went 70 miles an hour because their parents are tracking it on their phones on different ways they do that. The day, Friday, when I heard that some of the buses were coming back, one of the local bus drivers was telling some people. I texted my daughter and I said, the buses are coming back, and she said, that's wonderful news. I'm so excited. She just started high school this year. She's in STEM. She's top of her class. She works her butt off. But when she gets home from school, she goes directly. You said about kids sitting and texting for hours a day. My daughter, as soon as she gets home from school, she goes straight to dance or gymnastics. She's involved all the time. If she has homework, she has to do it on the bus because she don't have time for it. We have wonderful, absolutely fantastic kids in this community, and it saddens me to see what is going on in the community and to hear people say that they are walking away from the district because of all kinds of problems, and this bus situation topped it off. Thank you for your time, and I want to say thank you that Mr. Silver is still around. When my son was in elementary school, he come home one day and he said, I want to be a science teacher because Mr. Silver is so awesome. I want to be like him when I grow up. Well, now he's touring with bands and fixing guitars, but he loved Mr. Silver, and he struggled in school. Mr. Silver was one of the greatest teachers that he had. Thank you.
Thank you. All righty, I guess we have to figure out what you want for an emergency meeting, Dr. Couch.
Yes, special board meeting. Mr. Wheeler, I know we cannot have a meeting scheduled tomorrow because we're going to go to county commissioners, but I'm asking if we feel we'll have all of the details for the buses, and if we schedule the meeting for Wednesday. Do you?
We should be prepared on this.
Alrighty. So Wednesday or Thursday?
I'm not available Thursday.
Well, Thursday we have open house at elementary schools.
What are people's schedules? I could do Wednesday. Mr. Reed?
Not very hard.
Okay, what depends on what time, Dr. Couch?
I'm open. I mean, you tell me whenever we can get a quorum.
Mr. Getz, do you have a conflict on
No, I'm
Wednesday?
open after, either before 10 a.m. or after 10:30.
I'm not available until after 5. Mr. Williams? Why don't we do like 6? Mr. Reed, can you get here at 6? Okay, 6 o'clock on Wednesday, September 20th, we will have a special board meeting to finalize transportation-related issues that we approved. Procurement. All right. I am looking for, so the next regularly scheduled meeting will be October 9th, 2017, beginning at 5:30 p.m. The board will immediately go into closed session, and we will resume open session at 6:30. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are